And a good Tuesday evening to you, South Jersey. I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon with a couple of very special guests tonight. And every single Tuesday, welcome to the first episode of Tidal Flooding Talk.
Hi, I'm Palma, Accardi, and yes, we are hosting Tidal Flooding Talk, which is the first weekly web show dedicated to the challenges of coastal flooding.
And if you know anything, if you've been in South Jersey for any length of time, you know this guy right here, James Eberwine.
Dan, it's a pleasure. Palma, it's a pleasure being here,
and
especially on your first one talking about tidal flooding.
I mean, his official title is meteorologist. I call him my meteorological mentor, weather guru, hurricane specialist.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's an honor.
I think you'll be sampling some beers later at the bar as well.
Yeah.
We're here at the Irish Pub. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're here at the world-famous Irish Pub in Atlantic City on 164 South St. James Place. Like Dan said, every 7 p.m. Tuesday, join us, have a couple beers at the bar.
And it's tidal flooding talk, so that's what we're going to be talking about. Forecasting tidal flooding. You know, if the storms come in, we'll be talking about the incoming storms, the challenges of dealing with it, living with it along the shore, and coastal resiliency. It's all brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, a 501c3 charitable organization. They are working for you, free of charge, to help us fight tidal flooding, to raise awareness, to increase education, and to really make life along the shore easier. Of course, tidal flooding is a reality along the shore. If we can, learn to forecast it better and deal with it better, and there's some great projects in the works, and this is one of them. Every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Jim's our inaugural guest, so you guys can also, as with any Facebook Live, post questions and comments. Not sure how many we'll get to on our inaugural show, but we're going to work those in as well, and you can ask questions of our guests. And this is filmed in front of a live studio audience at the Irish Pub. As you said, great food, great drink, so you can come on down here and join us every Tuesday. We'll have guests on like elevating homes, flooding experts, weather gurus like Jim here, and a great lineup of guests lined up, and every Tuesday night. So we're going to give the first question to Palma.
All right.
Sure, okay. Well, what I think I could speak for our viewers when I ask this. Flooding seems to be happening all year round, and I don't know why that is. You're the expert. Why do we experience flooding every season?
Well, Palma, a lot of it has to do with where we are located latitude-wise. We're right at that cutoff point where we get tropical storms, potentially, and we also get nor'easters. So I like to tell people that, in essence, we kind of have a 12-month season for coastal flooding. And as sitting right here in Atlantic City, we've seen some pretty good floods, but we are unique. We only have 127 miles of coastline from Sandy Hook to Cape May, and we sit perpendicular to a lot of the winds that come in off the ocean, drive the waters into the back bay first, and then we get the flooding on the coast. But we are in a unique position. But over the years, we'll see how things are going to improve. Forecasting is improving really good, really good. Believe it or not, we're working with constants when you talk about tidal flooding. We have the moon and we have the sun. These are constants that you don't generally get in other storms, big storms. So we know when the high tide is, we know when the full moon is, new moon, and we can predict these things a little bit better. But New Jersey is unique for one other thing too, is our population. We have a tremendous population, most densely populated state in the country. So when we get a flooding event here, it gets a lot of publicity.
What are one of the big challenges for meteorologists in communicating tidal flooding? We have local residents,
right,
and not to slight tourists, but
right,
you live here year round. You're a little more knowledgeable as far as what certain winds do and what certain tides do and what moderate flooding means. So,
right,
so there is a difference in communicating that forecast between locals and tourists. But what are some of the challenges in effectively communicating a tidal flooding forecast?
I wish we could sit down with everybody from Cape May to Sandy Hook and sit down and explain to them. The tools for flooding are out there. In my opinion, coastal flooding is easier to forecast than, say, a big snowstorm, because we know that in certain areas will flood. We know the more vulnerable spots. The first place that floods in New Jersey is right here in West Atlantic City. And then we have the Fifth Street boat ramp in Wildwood. Then we have Green Street up in Tuckerton area. We know where the hot spots are. All we have to do is follow the information that's given to us by the computers, the wind speeds, the wind direction, which is critical. But once we have all that, the problem is, as you say, Palma, getting it out to the general public. And the information is there. If there was a way, and I'm sure you people are working on it, and I really applaud you for tackling this, because this is an extremely important part. When people ask me about a winter forecast, they're always thinking in terms of snow. I don't look at it that way. I look in terms, if we can get by a winter without a coastal storm event, that's a successful winter to me. And knock on wood, we've gone a pretty long time now without a real serious flooding event. We had one in January, and then January before, not just past January. But we do get flooding at the full moon, at the new moon, because of the gravitational pull. The lower tier, as I call them, areas that flood normally, unfortunately, will get that flooding every time you have a full moon or new moon, and if you have a wind coming off the ocean. So the information is there, and through your resources, I think the day will come when you're going to educate a good part of the community on how to prepare for these things. What they're most upset about is, I didn't know it was coming. And you know, Dan, working in this field, we do know it's coming. The idea is now trying to get it out to the general public, and this is a great medium to do that.
And cell phones and technology, is there, and some of the projects we're working on,
absolutely.
We can't go into them because they're still in development, is hopefully going to increase that awareness. And I think that's key, the awareness and the education. Because, Palma's going to ask next, New Jersey's very unique in terms of tidal flooding.
Right. Compared to the rest of the country, what makes us so vulnerable?
Again, our position, our latitude and longitude, if you look at Florida has a serious threat from tropical systems, but not nor'easters.
Right.
New York has a serious threat from nor'easters and tropical storms. We have the same thing. Again, it's our population and where we sit on the coast. Our back bays fill up first. They're the first thing that'll fill up with an onshore wind. And now, if the storm is strong enough in tracking our way, we're going to get that added surge as it comes close to us. So that, on top of what we've had in the back bays, flooding some of those roads, on top of the surge coming in, makes it really, really bad. Here's a statistic. Now, you may think this is really crazy. Our highest tide that we've had here, Dan, you know how I work with crazy stuff. Yep. Our highest tide that we've had in Atlantic City is 9.3 feet above mean lower low water, right? We have had 50-some thousand high tides come in over 40-some years, because we get 2 high tides a day. Only one reached 9.3, and you're going to say, well, that's not bad. That's pretty good odds. But, it only takes the one, and if you're not prepared for that one, then you can have a lot of things happen, a lot of disaster. But we kind of lucked out in Sandy, but I think because of Sandy, you're starting to see some improvements along the coast, which is very, very good.
And we're going to get into that with future guests. We're going to have Tom Heiss from Tom Heiss Insurance come down, and insurers are better prepared, and builders are better prepared, and we are becoming resilient, and that's one of the things. There is not officially this title, but is New Jersey the tidal flooding capital of the U.S.? Like it just seems, as a meteorologist, one thing I've noticed is the number of coastal flood advisories and warnings seem to be higher here than anywhere else in the country. I guess it depends on the year.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the year. And again, we've been in a lull for about 6 months now, where we really haven't had serious tidal flood. Again, we have absolutely, Palma. You got it down pat now. Okay? But again, we're in a broadcast media area where a little bit of flooding gets a lot of publicity. We've seen some serious ones down in the Norfolk area. And we've seen some real serious ones in New York. But yeah, Jersey, because of its location, because of its population, you get a flooding event, it shuts down the access roads. That's a big, big story. Because you're affecting the commerce and things like that. But compared to other areas, Massachusetts gets some bad ones. Long Island gets some very bad ones. But we get our share. But I think what you're going to see is better forecasting, and the forecasting is not that bad now, but if we could show the public how to stay on top of this stuff, then you'd see a sigh of relief when we have these events happening.
Do you think the frequency of some of these recent events like Sandy and Jonas and do you think it helps raise awareness that, okay, big storms can happen.
Absolutely.
And it also kind of gives us a benchmark level where we can say, because you mentioned 9.3 feet above mean low water.
Right.
I bet you most people don't know what the heck that means.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, Sandy was 9.3 or whatever,
yeah.
then all right, we have a measuring stick. We know what Sandy was, so we know this will be better or worse than Sandy. So do these storms, as bad as they were, do they help us in communicating the danger going forward?
Well, now, up until a couple of storms ago, we had no file footage. We could not show people what flooding did.
You didn't take video of the 44 hurricane?
No, I wasn't doing it.
No.
No, I wasn't. No, 1906 one.
1903.
1903. There you go. You're teaching me that. But we didn't have file footage like they do in Biloxi and Miami and the Keys and stuff like that. But in the last 10 years, we've had storms come up and affect us and flood us. Now we have file footage that we can show and we can look at. And the Weather Service in Mount Holly, and this was part of the projects I did when I was there, we have a list now called Tidal Impact Tables for each county in New Jersey. And we have gone back and looked at all these historical storms, put their heights on there. So now when a storm is coming, the general public gets this list and puts it on the refrigerator, and they say, oh, they're forecasting 8.7. Let's see, last time we 8.7, that happened. Oh, so we're okay because we're not going to get up here. See, that's the kind of information you need readily available to the general public. It is out there, and it's on the website and things like that. But once we educate the people who live here all year round, they know it. But as you said, we have a lot of tourists coming down here. And you asked about the uniqueness in New Jersey. New Jersey is the most engineered state in the country, I believe, for jetties and groins and protection. Our tourist industry is, $30 billion a year. So we do a lot to protect our beaches, and on top of that, protect the people who are coming to the beaches. And your forecasts are getting better and better and better. We just have to look at our infrastructure as well. Our infrastructure is kind of old, and the reason is we haven't had a lot of storms damage it. And I'll say something now which you may think I'm crazy in saying, and I do know that there were people who died in Maria in Puerto Rico, but because of Maria, they're going to have a better infrastructure, and unfortunately it takes a disaster to improve your conditions, and that's luckily we haven't had a real bad disaster yet, a lot of loss of life in New Jersey, but we've had a lot of damage in North Jersey. But unfortunately, in order to get ready for a big powerful storm, we have to improve things like bridges and roads, which are old in parts of New Jersey and which are inundated when you have floods. They're trying to lift some of the roads downstate and stuff like that, but it'll take a little bit. But educating the public like you're doing here is the very first and the most important step. Very first.
Well, I'll take a question. Ben Murphy mentions the March '62 storm.
Right.
We're coming up on March.
Right.
Wondering, March tides looking normal, any moon action, any big tides coming in March. Do we have anything to worry about in the near term in terms of tidal flooding? Because, March is that time of year when you can have those explosive storms.
Well, it's funny. When I worked for the Weather Service, when I would go to work in the wintertime, I used to play a game in search of the '62 storm. And I would be looking at all the forecasts, all the weather maps to see if there's anything that could possibly resemble the '62 storm, because it was our benchmark as far as coastal flooding. It was devastating in terms of 5 high tides, one getting higher than the other. So there's nothing in the near term. The end of February is going to end up pretty nice. I think probably the next chance of us getting any kind of tidal flooding threat would be around the 3rd to 4th of March. And that's also the next chance that we may have of a little bit of snow, because we're going to get cold again a little bit. There's a nice cold pool coming down, which when you get that with the warm air, you get a coastal storm, yeah. But that's what we're looking at. We learn from the past. Climatology is a very powerful tool, and by that I mean we look at all the storms in the past, see where they formed, what the result was, And we also look at the population, how it's increased, where most of the people are living, if there's been any kind of buildings, codes enforced, like after Sandy now. We're looking at a whole bunch of things in the weather community to make the next storm not as bad as the ones before, or survive the ones like Sandy and the derecho, which was a different animal. But forecasting is, again, believe it or not, tidal forecasting is very easy.
I think that's one of the biggest surprises to me to hear you say that. I forecast it all the time, but I guess it's easier. You know you're going to flood. Snowfall, we can say 3 to 6, 6 to 12. You have no idea. But tidal flooding, you know what's going to happen.
You know the hot spots. You know what's going to cause the top. You got, like I said, you've got the constants. You got the moon and the sun. When they're aligned, in conjunction or opposition, you know there's a gravitational pull. Now the next shoe you wait to drop is there a coastal storm coming out?
Right.
If there's a coastal storm with a new moon or a full moon, and you've got onshore winds for about 24 hours, you know you're going to flood. Now, where are the winds going to be the strongest? Well, if they're going to be in Cape May, you raise the flags down there too. And you say, listen, you guys are going to get more flooding than LBI. LBI is a hot spot too. LBI, because you got 72 there, the highway there. So those people out there are very vulnerable to flooding. But again, I work with these guys. I've been doing it for 35 years. They're really in tune to flooding. A lot of the emergency managers that you see in New Jersey, from Cape May, from Marty up through, from Vince, and then all the way up the coast, they're in tune. They get a jump on this coastal flooding. Now what we got to do is take that 5 or 6 day notice that we give them, turn it over to the public, so you're all on the same page. See, and that's the other thing about coastal flooding. Know where you are. Keep an eye on the new and full moon. You know, and then when you read the bulletins coming from the Weather Service and they say this tide is going to reach 7.2, you just break out that paper and say, well, we're fine. We're not going to. I had a crazy idea. That's crazy. This was crazy. I was telling people, if you want to remember what the flood did, what you ought to do after a big storm is get a can of spray paint and just spray where the tide came up. Now I could just picture these municipalities saying, hey, Jim, you're going to have people spray paint all over Margate and Ventnor and every place like that. But I go to Oyster Creek up there in Leeds Point.
Great place.
And and on the wall, they've got the watermark for Sandy on there.
Well, you could just say the Jersey Devil did it up there.
The Jersey Devil
did it up in Oyster Creek. Yeah. So that's one thing we hope to, as meteorologists, be better forecasters and better communicators of conveying who's going to flood and how long it's going to be, and part of the New Jersey Coastal Coalition is increasing awareness and education, and that's what these weekly tidal talks are going to go. Once again, we're at the Irish Pub, so Palma, just go a little bit about where we are, where you can find us, and when we're going to be here.
Well, we're here every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. It's 164 South St. James Place. The kitchen and bar are open 24/7. So
we're not going to be here 24/7.
That's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea.
No.
I'll drink
that. Yeah, so if you're ever hungry in the middle of the night or just need a drink, come on down.
And they've been great to help us. And again, that's what the Coastal Coalition's all about, is tidal flooding is a way of life. It's becoming a little more frequent, although we're in a good streak right now. This winter, we have not had any big storms, but we want to stay ahead of it, and we want to be resilient, and that's part of the plan. Now, in addition to talking to us, Jim, according to some commenters here, talks to some Girl Scouts as well. So Christine Grunler Scarpa saying, thanks for chatting with the Girl Scouts about hurricanes. I know that's one of your...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Thank you very much.
So Jim talks to Girl Scouts as well. And like I said, Jim's been my meteorological mentor ever since I came here 15 years ago. So really honored to have him as our first guest.
I appreciate that very much.
And we'll probably have Jim back as well when a storm's coming. If he ever finds that 62 storm he's looking for.
Absolutely.
We're going to raise the flags, and we'll have Jim back here
You'll
soon.
have plenty of notice.
That's right.
Plenty of notice up.
So join Palma, Accardi, and myself every Tuesday, 7 p.m. as we grow this live stream. You can join us on Facebook. We're going to archive these, so these will all be on the New Jersey Coastal Coalition website as well, njcoastalcoalition.com. And a lot more information will be coming there as well. Or you can come on down here to the Irish Pub and be the live studio audience. Right now we got a studio audience of one. Tom Q. He doesn't want to use his full name. Tom Q is there. And we hope to grow that audience. So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
great night.
Thank you.